Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Fitness Friday Posi-TIPS with Rachelle. Folks, we're on Fitness Friday. It is always the best day of the week. Gotta love it. Folks, here again on the lower level of Rachelle's Home Fitness Center for this episode. See, I like to change things up. So as people often say, I remind them of where's Waldo? Where's Waldo? Where's Rachelle? And that's actually true here on Fitness Friday. You just never know where Rachelle's going to turn up. That is so very true. And so, folks, on these episodes, as you've heard me speak a number of times over the years about the importance of competitive analysis, told you that is actually an area of expertise of mine, competitive analysis, but in particular, I am very keen on the concept of market disruption and marketplace disruption across various industries. And so that's why from time to time, I'll actually highlight some what could potentially be market disruptors. I know earlier this year, I highlighted Pure Fitness, which is launched in the United States in the Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area, and they're of course a Europe-based chain, but they allow freezes and cancellations of memberships via their app. So the cancellation process is in the hands of each individual member. So I'm watching that very, very closely just to see the potential impact of marketplace disruption, just how that's going to play out, And so very, very interested as well in tonal. And as I mentioned last week, in the midst of a longitudinal analysis, I'm going to be following tonal for a while because this is another example of what could potentially be a marketplace disruptor. Now, tonal's been around for a few years now, but really in terms of, you see their advertising proliferated during the coronavirus and the height of the coronavirus pandemic when we saw ads and all of that, which still remains, their advertising budget clearly remains extremely high. And so one thing we have to, even though they've been around for a while, when we think about the ubiquitous advertising that we've seen here regarding tonal is because of the concept is very complicated. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. The concept is very complicated. And in essence, while they've been around for a while, and certainly members of their target audience are aware that they've been around for a while in terms of their mass advertising that they've engaged in, is certainly indicative of the fact that in many respects, from a mass marketing perspective, it's like they're in launch mode. They're just, and launch mode is very expensive. Whether you're talking about a new facility opening up in a market, whether the initial location or a brand new product launching, launches tend to be very, very expensive because there is often an educational element from the standpoint of what is this? What is this gym? What is this chain? What is this product? What is this service? And so you have to generate awareness, and that from a marketing and advertising perspective tends to be very, very expensive. Certainly depends on the product or service and who the target market. There's a lot of different factors that play into that, but certainly a new product or service or a new product launch in a new market is certainly far more expensive than a product or service that's already been established and been around for a number of years. There's just differences there. And so certainly with tonal, I'm gonna speak here about their Strength Institute Summit that I attended on March 30th. Now I was in the midst of the first marketing series this year when this educational opportunity, this online educational opportunity took place. But for me to have mentioned it then, that would have been too promotional. And so, I try extremely hard to not do that, And so you always know, particularly on my marketing episodes, I like to give a disclaimer that again, that any of my conversation and discussion, my thoughts today are not an endorsement of any product, service, company, entity. These are examples. And then what could potentially be a market disruptor here with tonal. And so I received an email, and I talked about this last week, and this is certainly a case study. I'm just giving you in each of these 3 episodes, and we'll discuss a little bit more next week, in addition to some other examples of fitness marketing that I've had for a while now, and just going to share those because I can't spend an entire episode highlighting one entity. And so, because again, that's too promotional, and just so, and I'm actually going to talk about a second entity in this episode, so I've got a little bit of wiggle room. But I wanted to keep this episode pretty tight, pretty focused, and I'm going to spend certainly the bulk of the time highlighting tonal. And so, since I went and got a product demonstration at our location here in Troy, Michigan at the mall, the Nordstroms late last year. So as a result of that, when I signed up for that appointment to go in and then just learn more about that and then just observe and watch people interact, all of that's part of what I do from a market analysis standpoint, certainly from a competitive analysis standpoint. And so what did I do? So signed up for that, and so that put me on the prospect list. Happens all the time. You and I both know when you sign up for something, a lot of times then the company will begin their marketing to you vis-a-vis email or text, whatever the case may be, direct mail, and other forms as well. So I was on this list, email list. I get emails regularly, promotional and prospect emails. And so I received an email announcing this Strength Institute Summit, which took place, as I stated, on March 30th. And so it was an online conference, sponsored by Tonal, and it talked a lot about science behind their product, and just it was a lot. It was a lot. And so I'm just going to highlight, in the interest of time, some of these, just a few of these sessions, and it'll certainly reinforce the point that this is we're talking about science, you're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And so as a result of that, again, like I said, from the educational standpoint, a product like this is going to certainly requires a level of education, a level of awareness generating and building. What is it? In terms of helping individuals or prospects understand the value behind the product. That is so important, particularly for a product like this and at the price point that it is. And so that particular, so it was morning, essentially half day. It was, of course, they're based in California. And so it was Pacific time, and so I'm just going to highlight some of the later morning sessions through the afternoon. And so there was a session entitled Perform Better, Think Faster, Train Wiser. And that was by Louisa Nicole. Next, we had a session after that, Human Movement Determines What Happens to Us, by Marcus Elliott, MD. And then they had a break, and then the following session was Disparity of the Sexes, Dispelling the Myths and Generalizations of Strength Training and Women. # Women Are Not Small Men. Next, Promoting Optimal Adaptations to Exercise, Lessons Learned from Professional Sport, by David Martin, PhD. And then we had the closing remarks by Matt Bean, SVP of Performance Innovation, Tonal. So had an opportunity to listen to these sessions, and some more than once, because they give you, after that particular day, there was a link to follow up where you had 30 days to listen to all the sessions. You could listen as much as you wanted. And so I certainly listened to some a couple times, a couple of them, I think 3 times, because again, just to understand and take notes and understand the science behind it, the AI and the machine learning that's behind that, and could this potentially be just in terms of what potential market effects or ramifications on a broader scale. Certainly, and as you heard in one of the titles here, you think about where they've already been well established. So we think about professional sports. And as I talked about in last week's episode, if you've seen the Tonal ads, particularly earlier this year, you saw a lot of LeBron James. You saw a lot of LeBron James, and I learned when I went in person and asked him questions, as I often do, to learn more that LeBron is one of the investors in Tonal. And so you've got professional golfers, and so there's just different Serena Williams. You've got different professional athletes who have been featured in advertising, but are also certainly investors in Tonal. And so you can see, and particularly from the science and the background and the performance, sports performance and movement science and all of that, why professional sports would just be all over it. And certainly they would have, the budgets to be able to handle this. Certainly, university top sports teams. You can just think about it again from market segmentation. Where's the opportunity? Think of a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Where are the opportunities? Professional sports, definitely. Teams, they're going to have the budgets, they're going to have the understanding, and it's just, and again, from an elite perspective, and that's where I perceive that from a marketing standpoint, I certainly perceive them going from elite to everyday. So you think about the elite athlete like a LeBron James or Serena Williams to the everyday person. And so I'm going to highlight a couple of those everyday person profiles next week. And certainly there's been this inclusion and certainly transformation to be more inclusive from a target marketing standpoint. Because when you think of elite product and elite service, all the way to just becoming an everyday person and becoming more inclusive from a marketing standpoint of, okay, if we want to grow our market, we want to increase sales of this product, we need to increase the total number of people who potentially be customers or purchase our product or service. And so that was the conference. Not going into, not going to be highlighting any of the individual ones, but what I do want to highlight is something, where is it here? And so from a marketing, before I highlight this, from a marketing standpoint, I had a professor a long time ago tell me, and it's amazing the stuff you remember, long time ago, and I know I've mentioned this at least a couple of times on Fitness Friday over the years, who said, from a marketing standpoint, if you watch an ad, if you see an ad, you see a billboard, you get a mobile message, whatever the case may be, you see it, and it's like, oh yeah, you get it, particularly pretty quickly, you get it, you understand it, it speaks to you, then you're in the target audience. You're part of that target market because the target market will get it. The target will just, yeah. And I've kind of given you that as examples from a marketing message standpoint with Edge Fitness, where I've said, in that first marketing series where I highlighted a couple of examples, where on December 7th, 2020, that email that came through with the subject line that said, fitness is the gift that always fits. And I got that instantly. That made me smile instantly because I stated in the first marketing series earlier this year, if anybody who knows me, particularly you know me well, you know that if you want to hit a home run in terms of gift giving, fitness is always a good bet and a safe bet. That is so true. So that message spoke to me instantly. All right, and yes, discover the gym you deserve was another message. Last week I highlighted Better Out There starts in here. And those are all marketing messages that just clicked, hit with me instantly. And so that is true for you as well. There's certain marketing messages that come to you that you're exposed to and you get instantly, or you ask yourself, what is this? I'm trying to understand this. So from a marketing standpoint, understanding being part of the target market and just kind of knowing, and so for me, from a professional standpoint, whether the message is directed to me or not, I still have to understand the overall marketing concept. And what I'm saying is, I can't sit there and say, well, I'm not part of their target market, clearly, whatever, and I'm just tuning this out. Whether something is targeted towards me or not, then that's, it just requires an ability, certainly an ability that I've developed to say, hold on here. Okay, let me make sure I understand this. I'm not part of their target market, but let me take a step back. If I were, then okay, yep, makes perfect sense. So we all have to kind of have that ability to be able to, while a message may not just hit us and just say, oh yeah, I get this. We've got to have the ability to not just tune things out, particularly when we're in a professional situation, when we're evaluating marketing. If that's something you do or you're evaluating your competitors, and perhaps they have a slightly different target market, we have the ability to be open. So I mentioned that professor's remark to say, from a fitness standpoint, there's been a couple of times over the years where I have basically just said, because typically, it's pretty, the messages are pretty similar, and so and while yes, Edge was a outlier because that messaging is right up there. We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization. So I'm a self-actualizer. So those messages just really just nailed that from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I got that instantly. Discover the gym you deserve. Oh, absolutely, because I'm all about deservingness and worthiness in life, and certainly fitness is a part of that. So that just, that just helping me instantly. So that's more of a outlier, I would say, because you don't see a lot of marketing, particularly in the fitness space, that's targeted towards self-actualization. But Tonal does. I will give them credit from that standpoint and who their target market, particularly their early target markets, being your professional athletes, elite athletes, college athletes, individuals like that, certainly is there. But there's been a couple of times from a messaging standpoint in the fitness industry where I've said, huh? Where I've kind of been just stumped, kind of initially, there's kind of been this kind of mental issue where I'm thinking like, huh? Even trying to step outside and say, okay, let me look at this objectively. Yes, okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but what I want to do is highlight and to have this discussion, I'm going to have a corporate Rachelle in terms of what my corporate response would have been. See, folks, you got to just kind of look at yourself and just evaluate how you would have responded in a situation, corporate Rachelle versus consultant Rachelle. And so I can look back and I can just say, yeah, those responses would have been very, very different. And so, but what I want to highlight now, and so the very first, let me do it this way. Let me do it this way. So the first example of that happening, and then I'm just going to move into the second example. So the first example that happened, so the corporate Rachelle's response versus the consultant Rachelle. So when I'm remembering Rachelle in corporate America, syrupy sweet, Southern belle, people pleaser, love to tell people what they wanted to hear. I mean, and if you're honest with yourselves, folks, particularly in professional situations, how many times have you come across something or heard something or been in a meeting or just, or just had these thoughts in your mind that, this is a horrible idea, whatever the case may be. This isn't going to work. This project is doomed. And then all of a sudden, when it was time for your feedback, you just gave glowing remarks and whatever. Everybody has been there, right? And what drives that? The fear of loss. Okay? Want to keep your job. There's just no other way to describe it. You want to keep your job. And so the very first moment where I was like, huh? From a marketing standpoint. Now, truly going to highlight, you all know I'm a past member of Planet Fitness. Enjoyed my experience there. I think very highly of Planet. I highlight them regularly, particularly from a marketing standpoint. Had a very good experience there as a member. Would do it again. In fact, actually, the 28th, June 28th of this week, it was actually a dual anniversary of mine. It was the 17-month anniversary of my being a member of Edge Fitness Farmington Hills, but it was the 5-year anniversary of my joining Planet Fitness. So it was an interesting little fun fact there where I joined on the 28th of June and then had a dual membership still at Powerhouse where I kind of tested the waters and then decided I was going to make a go of Planet and cancel my Powerhouse membership on July 11th, 2017. So that was just a very interesting day. So I think very highly of the franchise. But, the corporate Rachelle, going back to when we know, the ubiquitous messaging of the judgment-free zone, and so the judgment-free zone coupled with the lunk alarm, if you don't know what those, particularly the lunk alarm, just go to YouTube, Google it, whatever you need to do, and you'll see exactly what that is, as well as them having caricatures of bodybuilders, little bitty signs with a bodybuilder, with a character of a bodybuilder, and then how you have kind of like the no smoking signs where they're in that circle and there's that kind of line across. And this is actually something that I mentioned when I was a member of Planet. So this isn't just, like a new thought of mine. When I was a member, this had 2018 or 2019, where I shared this on a Fitness Friday, my thoughts on the concept of the lunk alarm and these caricatures and what that represented. And then certainly from a corporate perspective, and what I mean by that is, so if I were sitting at the table where it was an ad agency pitching the team, pitching the marketing team on, hey, we have this concept, this is what it is, we're going to be the judgment-free zone, and certainly if you were again, the target market, primary, first-time gym goers, secondary, casual gym goers, tertiary, everyone else, all right? Talked about those market segments here over the number of times over the years. So you get that judgment, I don't want to get judged, whatever, this and that. So it wasn't, I understood from that perspective of somebody first time stepping into, and they don't go very often, whatever, that is, quite frankly, just very, very brilliant marketing from that standpoint. And others have certainly had variations of that and tried to have a more inclusive message. So I would have sat at the table and quite frankly, I would have heard that and just said, oh yes, okay, we've got the lunk alarm and that thing is loud. And it's potentially could be humiliating. Well, actually, it has been. It's certainly anecdotal reports, on YouTube, and if you Google it, people being embarrassed, humiliated, feeling rejected when that thing goes off. But fortunately, as I stated, when I was a member, I only heard it go off one time. So in all the time I was a member playing at different locations in different states, I only heard it go off one time. So I got lucky, but other places, certainly other parts of the country and other clubs, they are not so lucky. So I just got fortunate. But I think part of that too is I'm an super early morning exerciser, so I think the potential exposure to that would be more limited. But anyway, that is part of their marketing identity. And so I would have sat at the table and been like, okay, yeah, it sounds like we have something here. This is going to be we've got a true point of market differentiation here. And so that would have been my response, sitting at the table smiling and just agreeing with everything that was said. And so, but again, why? The fear of, I don't want to make anyone mad. I want to be liked by everyone. That used to be a big thing for me. I want to be liked by everyone, whatever. And so that would have been my response. And ask yourself, what would be your response? In various situations, what is your response? All right, and so the consultant Rachelle, however, and this is what I mentioned, some of what I mentioned when I talked about this on that Fitness Friday episode a few years ago, is that, I would look at that now and just, kind of retroactively putting myself in that situation and saying, okay, this is going to become an Achilles heel for the brand. All right, so because what you have is the double-edged sword. Yes, members of the target audience will see that, and they will be assured by seeing and knowing there's a lunk alarm there, and being reassured that if someone potentially drops a weight or whatever the case may be, that loud thing's going to go off, and perhaps that person won't do it again. Whatever. There's a lot of different scenarios where that could play out, where the lunk alarm goes off. So my thought is that would be an Achilles heel that is going to haunt the brand forever. Because you have the folks that are supportive, but you also have folks on the back end of that who have been experienced or certainly exposed to that and been the subject of that, where the alarm has been ringing off on them, and then they go in, they complain, and negative word of mouth, and they go online, and whatever the case may be. So that's certainly, my perspective has been from a consulting perspective. And so this is a big thing here, and this is the point I want to make here, and as I pointed to certainly also in that episode, particularly with the caricatures of the pictures of the bodybuilders that hang around the gyms. All right, so it's essentially no bodybuilders. Okay, so my thought on that, and certainly what I shared is, how does that differ? How do those character pictures, no bodybuilders, how does that differ from the no Negroes? And there's certainly other groups that we could have a number of signs, no Negro signs that proliferated in the Jim Crow South. And so, yes, Rachelle now is a no-nonsense Northerner, but I have essentially, my parents are both from the heart of the Mississippi Delta, Greenville, Mississippi, raised in abject poverty, raised in the Jim Crow South. And so, from a consulting standpoint, that is something I would have raised and said, how is this different? Is this particularly now in our current era where the concept of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is being highlighted across, just ubiquitous manner, across industries, product services, whatever, universities, just everywhere. It's a very big topic. And so how does that fit in? Having characters and saying no bodybuilders, essentially, we don't want these people. How does that fit in from an inclusion standpoint? How does that just even currently, how does that fit in? But even just going back, saying, how is that any different? When people would go into stores, when people would go into restaurants, when people would go into certain places and see signs on the walls that they were not welcome, And so that is certainly, like I said, from a consulting standpoint, I would have said, hold on now. hold on now. Okay, so our position, we're going to be the judgment-free zone. And so we're going to have a lunk alarm. So calling someone a lunk, is that judgmental or is it not? Having signs with characters of bodybuilders, like no bodybuilders, is that judgmental or not? So that is the difference in my responses. And that's why, when I look back, and I was at Northwestern, and I said, okay, this is my life plan. And I had it all planned out. It's just funny now. It's funny to me now. But like I always say, just have a plan, but be open, certainly committed to the vision, but be flexible and adaptable because life will happen, things will change. And certainly, like I love Detroit. I did not expect to love it, when I moved here and moved to Dearborn and just subsequently moved and bought this condo in Novi. Very, 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 very pleased with my experience in the state of Michigan, certainly here in Southeast Michigan. But this wasn't part of my plan, but I was open. And so I understand the spirit. It's just in terms of trying to say, okay, our primary target audience is who? First-time gym goers, secondary, casual gym goers. What can we do from a messaging standpoint to make these people feel comfortable, to be reassured, you belong, yada, 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 some of their other messages. Certainly understand the spirit with which, that messaging was all, conjured up and certainly developed. But from a marketing standpoint, certainly from a consulting standpoint, I would have pushed back. I would have pushed back hard. But it just took, again, the growth that it takes. Like, I wanted to be a consultant long before I was ready. And part of that is your ability to not be afraid, to deliver sometimes the news that isn't always positive, but also do it in a respectful manner, in a caring manner, and with a positive spirit. So even when I do these episodes, sometimes, on the occasion where perhaps something is I have a negative experience and something doesn't work out, or my thoughts or perhaps on an issue or subject are not positive, I still strive to bring balance to the situation and objectivity and just kind of understanding. And so that took time, and that took, work. That took certainly work, and I continue to work on that. So it doesn't turn into this big bash fest, and so that's something I continue to work on, but that's what I would have said. It's just having the diversity of thought. Yes, diversity in other areas, very, very important, but also, too, part of that DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, diversity of thought, where I would have brought that to the table to say, well, hold on, how does this differ? How does this differ from the Jim Crow South? How does this differ? There's other groups, we could have a number of different examples, but how does that differ? So that's what I would have brought to the table. And next, and there's particularly from a fitness perspective, you have the issue of, again, from the concept of understanding DEI, ableism. Ableism is so important now. It's always has been, but it's something we all have to pay particular close attention to. Particular close because there's individuals of all types and abilities who engage in fitness. All right, age, we think about age, there's age ranges, ability ranges. So the importance of being inclusive is certainly something there. So I want to talk about the second example here. So the second half of this episode, I'm going to highlight tonal, which has been the second example where I heard some messaging and it kind of stopped me in my tracks and I said, huh? So here we go. So this was what I'm about to read here, took notes here, word for word, got a quote here, what was highlighted. So this was not, what I'm about to read to you, this quote, was not introduced as the mission, like a mission statement of tonal. It was certainly included. But to me, just personally, like it sounds like one, and so this is a quote that I pulled from that conference, and so here it is. Without further ado, quote: "What we're doing here at Tonal is democratizing access to personalized trainers, not by creating more humans to do it, but actually by creating an intelligent fitness system, machines, algorithms, and experiences that can bring personalized training into the home and make it accessible to everyone. That's what we're doing here at Tonal." And so I heard that and I was thinking, okay, democratizing access to personalized trainers. And let me go ahead and state, once again, I understand the spirit behind this. I understand the positive spirit behind this. I understand understand where it was going, what the intentions are, I understand that. But the challenge with that is, we're talking about, when we think about democratizing access. So we just use those two words. There was a lot there in that statement. There's a lot there. We're talking about AI, machine learning. So we talk about technology. We're talking, there's HR implications because we're talking about, not having more humans as personal trainers, but we've got the machine learning to handle that. So there's HR implications for that. There's a lot there in that statement, but I just want to focus on two words: democratizing access, and then just the next few, two personal trainers. So, okay, corporate Rachelle would have said, okay, that sounds great. That sounds great. And that's why I'm just saying that and I make this comment and I highlight these because I've done it myself, where I kind of may have heard something and been like, this what? And then, oh yes, that's great. Yes, boss. Yeah, we're gonna take this and run with it. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. And then I just recognize that, particularly, there's certainly cases where we have to push back and certainly challenge situations, even if we do understand the spirit with which the concept, the messaging was generated. So we contrast corporate Rachelle. Yeah, that sounds great. I used to say that so often. I used to say that so often, and I'll definitely just share this in a moment of, let me digress here for a moment of transparency. There's one thing that I wish I could have done differently. Just looking back in my history, just professionally as well as personally, it would be to have not always told people what they wanted to hear. I was famous for that. I was a huge people pleaser. And I just look back because I remember I would have this sometimes, these just mental, this cognitive dissonance going on where I'm thinking, yeah, this is great, this is a real winner. And then while mentally inside my head I'm thinking, this is this field concept, this execution, we need to do this, we need to do that, whatever, this and that. But that's we're all learning, folks. We're learning, growing, and developing, and evolving as people. And that's why you always hear me on these episodes when I talk about what are my two fundamental objectives here on Fitness Friday and in life, and certainly professionally as well as personally, to help people and to tell the truth. And so that's why you always hear me tell the truth, not tell people what they want to hear, tell people the truth, all right? And so consultant Rachelle would have said, okay, so we're going to democratize access to personalized trainers, ... I'm not going to read the whole quote, with a machine that costs almost $3,000 before taxes and other fees, and some of those fees, are recurring monthly. And there is a price. I'm going to talk about this next week in the final marketing episode. There's a hefty price increase coming on Total coming soon. So we're talking about an expensive machine here. So we want to democratize access to what amounts to be an expensive machine relative to competitors. Now again, we talk about the science behind it, the movement science, the biomechanics. There's a lot behind that, and so there's certainly, from a pricing standpoint, from a corporation, from Tonal's perspective, certainly I would imagine there's a lot of justification for that cost, for that price, and what you're getting, cost benefit. All right, but for just thinking for the average person, or even the average person that seeks to begin a fitness journey or continue their fitness journey, we're talking about a machine that currently is going up very soon, but it currently costs almost $3,000 before taxes and other fees. So we're talking about democratizing access. So my thought on that is, okay, well, that's why I said my perception of this shift, and that's why I like to study. I have interest in certain entities, studying the shift between elite. Remember I said earlier in this episode, from elite to everyday. From a messaging standpoint, where you've got LeBron James loves it, uses it, to your average day. Like the last week I mentioned the breast cancer survivor. I'm going to highlight that profile as an example next week, where I'm going to read the email. So you've got just every day. So we're highlighting some everyday people that are going through things, and they have bought Tonal and have experienced Tonal and that are enjoying it's working for them. All right, but So democratizing access. So just spending much time, a lot of time, thinking about this and saying, okay, you want to democratize access. Talking about machine learning, algorithms, all of that. And certainly for the prime, we think about primary target audience, we think about the elite athletes, professional sports. Bam, yes. They can all have access to this, particularly those, especially, again, the limiting factor being, can they, yes, professional sports teams, then yes, they will have the budget, they'll be able to afford it. It's just a matter of if they want it or not, all right? Because they're concerned with movement science and a lot of that, those type of, athletic training concepts and taking the athletes who may be already elite and continuing to refine and develop their skills, or those who want to become elite and have potential and moving them up towards that elite status. So that is from a primary target marketing perspective. Bam, yep, there it is. Bam, right there. Understand it. But when you shift towards the everyday person, and that's why I'm saying the education that has to occur over and over, and the marketplace adoption, where your average everyday person, the movement science, do they know what that is? Do they understand how beneficial that is? Do they understand the cost-benefit analysis of how this machine will improve? And so that's all figured in, and into, from a marketing standpoint, how does this fit when you're talking about broadening the base of potential customers? What's there? What is it going to take to move these people along? From awareness, again, talked about that number of episodes ago, the AIDA, awareness, interest, desire, and action, the AIDA model, moving people through, moving them along the continuum. All right, and so from the broader base of customers, it's going to take a lot more. It's going to take a lot more to get the average person to understand that aspect of the biomechanics and what does this all mean, and then the machine learning aspect and all of this and that. So there's certainly a lot of learning opportunities that can be very expensive in terms of helping people to understand, but democratizing access. And so when I think about that term, democratizing access, we think about democratizing access, and we think, and when we hear that term, we think, okay, free and open, free and available. There's different ways that that's described depending on what realm we're talking about. So, so democratizing access. And so with the machine's cost, that's from a consulting perspective to say, okay, so we have this expensive machine, so we're going to democratize access with the average, which is the average everyday person. What is their ability? Are they will be able to afford this? Will they understand? And so then you're talking about a whole separate issue of from a competitive analysis standpoint, the competitive situation that is framed here with personal trainers. Again, not by hiring, what was the quote? Not by hiring, again, not by having more personal trainers, by having the machine learning. So we think about, I live here in Detroit, and when we think about the automation that's occurred in so many different industries, and so that's part of that messaging. And so that's there, and that, so you have that machine, you have that messaging, and so when I think of democratizing access, you think about in the fitness industry, from a fitness perspective, I think of Planet Fitness. Because Planet Fitness, again, you still even that, because they offer free fitness training from day one. And so when they do offer DYOP, design your own program, where you can work with a trainer, one-on-one, they can design your program, and that's all free. But again, even in that, the limiting factor is the individual has to have a membership. So when you talk about democratizing access, that is can be a challenging concept when you're talking about a commercialized product or service. Because again, there will be the profit motive there will be, in the fitness industry, a need, to have that person be a member or whatever the case may be. So from a fitness facility standpoint, democratizing access, could that be just, when you look at Planet Fitness and say, well, they offer it free, but you got to have a membership, all right? So that next, I would say YouTube. Think about YouTube, because they've got a gazillion free videos, fitness-oriented, health-oriented, wellness-oriented, nutrition-oriented. What did you hear so many times during the pandemic? People saying, okay, I can watch YouTube for free, regardless of what it was. Yes, in the fitness industry and workouts and all of this and that. But also you have people doing their own haircuts, cutting their own family's hair by watching YouTube videos. All right, and so you can look at, we think about democratizing fitness, and from there is democratizing access to personalized trainers, So democratizing access, YouTube, you can get that for free. But again, the limiting factor is an individual would have to have access to the internet. That would be and everyone doesn't have that, across the world, even across this nation. All right, there's a digital divide that's often talked about. And so it's just a very challenging concept when you're talking about democratizing access. When you've got revenue targets and commercialization of products and services can be tough, but like I said, I understand the spirit with which that came from, that messaging came from. And so again, if you're an elite team, if you're an elite basketball, if you're the Golden State Warriors, yes, you're not concerned about the price of this, you can get a number of them, and so again, athletic teams, D1, Division I conference teams, they can have access to that again, but the limitation is, what is the budget of the program? Depending on what their budget is, will they be able to afford it? And so there's always going to be some limiting factors. And so the democratizing access concept sounds great, because you know how I feel. Like everyone in the world should be passionate about fitness, but it's just a very difficult concept when you're talking about democratizing access. Very, very, very tough, because there's divides, all types of divides in this country. Certainly places in this country where there is no gym, there are no fitness centers, there are no community centers, and the ability to purchase an expensive, in-home fitness machine device would be impossible for some. But for members of their target audience, they absolutely get it. They absolutely get it. Somebody loves the science behind that, somebody that has the funds, the finances to be able to handle that, not a problem at all. And so those are just a couple of key points, certainly that I would have raised from a consulting standpoint, and so just the socioeconomic considerations that are behind that. Because I even look back at my own history, like as passionate, last 28 years of passionate, I've been about fitness on this journey. And I even think when I tell you, when I lived in Miami, when I was broker than broke, like the concept, but then again, on my own kind of biases, remember I was just exclusively gyms until the coronavirus happened and gyms closed down. So there was kind of that factor, that limiting factor, my own limiting factor. But I couldn't have afforded that. As passionate as I was at the time, like I couldn't have afforded that, a tonal device or anything, anything like that. So even financially, I was working on my first graduate degree, but I wouldn't have had the money. And there's a lot of people, that were in that situation, some that are in that situation, and so it's just a very, very challenging concept. But yes, we want to be inclusive. We want to include as many people as possible. Yes, we don't want to feel like we're eliminating anyone, limiting anyone. But the summarize here to wrap this episode up, it was very informative. That conference, I learned a lot. That's why I told you I listened to some of these sessions multiple times, because it was complicated, because we're talking about the science behind that, the biomechanics, movement science. It was very, very fascinating. Certainly learned a lot. But just to say that marketing is tough. Marketing, it can be very, very challenging depending on what the product or services, the target markets are. It can be challenging. Everything from launching a new product to expanding or growing a product that's been on the market for 30 years. It's not easy. There can be challenges. But I think what's important is that we all just be open to a wide variety of opinions on sometimes when we're making decisions, and that's why market research is so important to evaluate what's happening, what's going on, what does our potential target market think, and what are do we have any people around us that would be willing to kind of tell us the truth, to say, hey, you know what, like me, I would be like, you know what, there was a number of years where I would have, I was just broker than broke. There's no way I could have afforded this. Science or not, but also too, another limiting factor, again, my own is I'm old school. So I want my regular machines, the concept of me standing in place, in one place, making this happen, making the workouts happen. If you've seen me in any gym, and it's true here at Rachelle's Home Fitness Center, I'm all over the place. Like I cross-train, I'm all over the place. But there's certainly people that have bought this product, that love it, and this is true in any case. But I know I would have sat at that table and been like, hold on now. Speaking from someone, again, I come from a working class family, It just that I've experienced hardship in my life, particularly when moving on up towards my life and working towards my life goals. I would have certainly had some thoughts and spoken on behalf of people that just would have had a lot of challenges affording, product or a service like that. And going back to Planet, would have expressed some concerns about what are some of the implications, where we've already learned some lessons, all right, from some of the historic years in this country that would make this particular messaging, positioning a challenge for us. And this is going to become and remain an Achilles heel that will follow us for the length of this brand. And that's certainly been the case with Planet, folks. But that's all I have for you today. I wanted to keep this episode kind of tightly focused on this concept of messaging, and certainly just thinking about your own scenarios where you're in situations like, what would you say? Do you just smile? Like I've been known to do a number of times over the years. Like, all my bosses love me, and I told them what they wanted to hear, and it was great. But it's like, no. And then, of course, there's a way to deliver news. There's a way, you're respectful, you honor people, you honor the spirit of decisions and things that are done and said. You come with it, when you have the right motive, it comes across. And so, folks, I cannot wait to wrap this marketing series up next week. That is all I have for you today. So stay tuned for next week. We're going to wrap this thing up. We're going to land this plane. But until then, remember, I am positively passionate about your fitness, success, and marketing. Make it great.